Okay, so this is going to be the reteach. For those of you that did poorly on the quiz, there's probably a couple of reasons. One was, well, hopefully it wasn't you got too confused that it was multiple choice and you just simply picked the wrong answers. Um, Two, maybe some misconceptions about when you don't flip the inequality. We'll try to clear that up right now. And then I guess lastly is just some weak solving equations skills. So if your problem is I'm just weak on solving equations, right? This is not the video that's going to help you. So send me another email, and maybe we can talk about weaknesses on solving equations. Okay. So if you look at the bottom of this form, there's a link to a worksheet. I gave you a ton of problems. You don't need to do them all, but I gave you a ton of them. I also gave you the answers. So you should be able to, check and see if you're getting these right. Hey, don't ask for the retake. Like say, hey, Mr. C, I'm ready to take the retake now. Don't ask for the retake unless you can get every one of these right. And by right I mean if you make a simple mistake, you should be able to get every one of these correct. So I forget how many I gave you, 30 or 40 of these. If you missed 1 out of 30 or 1 out of 30 or 1 out of 40, you're probably okay. But if you're missing half of these still, then you're not ready for a retake. We just need to do more practice. We can do this. The quarter doesn't end until the end of May, so we got plenty of time to fix this mistake. I certainly would like you to fix this before the test next. I don't know when it is, next Friday, something like that. So let's see if we can get you some help here. Hopefully your mistake was simple ones. Okay, let's talk about quickly the basics. So when we solve inequalities, we solve them just like equalities, right? The algebra does not change. You get rid of addition, you subtract. You get rid of multiplication, you divide that part. Do the distributive property. If you got variables on both sides, move the smaller of the two. The one change when we solve inequalities is if you ever multiply or divide both sides. If you do the distributive property and there's a negative involved, you do not flip the inequality. The only time you flip the inequality is when you're multiplying and dividing both sides of the inequality by a negative. So if you are multiplying or dividing both sides of the inequality by a negative, you flip the inequality. And then the last obvious difference is that you graph the answer. So occasionally, I guess this would be like the third or the fourth type of mistake you can make, is that you get to the right answer and then you just read it incorrectly when you make your graph. Remember, I always recommend read from variable to number and see if you're getting bigger or getting smaller. And just like I said, don't read it from left to right always. Read it from variable to number. All right, I'm going to do the first 4 problems out of however many I gave you, 30 or 40 of them. I'm going to do the first 4. I'm not going to do any of the ones that have variables on both sides. We'll talk about them here at the end. Like I said, this is not a reteach on how to solve inequalities algebraically. This is, what are the difference between solving equations and inequalities? Just those differences. All right, so here's question number 1. So let's see, I got variable on one side, the left side, so I don't have it on both. It looks like I got the distributive property, so we do the distributive property first. So if I do the distributive property on this one, yes, I am multiplying the 10 and the b by -6, but I'm not multiplying both sides. I'm not multiplying the 18 by -6. I'm distributing the -6 to the inside of the parentheses on the left side. So this one, I will not flip the inequality, okay, at least on this step. So I'm going to distribute the -6 to the inside. So hopefully, you don't have a problem with the distributive property. Okay, now I'm going to just solve it algebraically. All right, so I always get rid of addition subtraction first. So I'm going to get rid of the -60. So add 60 to both sides. And now we're ready for the multiplication division step. Now notice on this one, now I am going to divide both sides by -6. So if I divide both sides by negative or multiply both sides by negative, I need to flip the inequality. So 6 goes into 78 13 times, but I'm not dividing by 6. I'm dividing by -6, so I need to flip the inequality. See what I did there? All right, I did not flip the inequality on step number 1 because I was just doing the distributive property on the left side. So the only time you flip the inequality is when you multiply both sides by the negative. Also, just because it says -13 there doesn't mean I flip the inequality. I only flip the inequality if I'm actually multiplying or dividing by a negative number. All right, to graph this sucker, And it will be a multiple choice quiz as well. So the graphs are, you're just going to choose which graph is correct. For this particular one, I'm going to read it from variable to number, variable to number. So this time I am going from left to right. So it says B is bigger than negative 13. So it should be an open circle, right? Open circle on negative 3. And all the answers are bigger than 13, or negative 13. Does that make sense? If that does not make sense, make sure you are email me saying, "Hey, I don't get number that first one. Why? Whatever your question was." The only way that we can get you to where you can pass is if you ask questions. Also, if you need some one-on-one, we can a Zoom conference together as well too. Just ask for that, and we'll do a couple of them together. All right, let's do number 2. So number 2, no distributive property necessary. Notice the variables on the right side this time. So we get rid of that plus 5 first. To get rid of plus 5, we subtract 5 from both sides. And then it looks like we're going to multiply both sides by 9. Notice I'm not multiplying by a negative, so I don't flip the inequality. The only time you're going to flip the inequality is if you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number. I'm multiplying by a positive 9, so I don't flip the inequality. So this one might cause you a problem because, like I said, I want you to read it from variable to number, from variable. So this time I'm reading it from right to left. This says x is smaller than 0, right? Smaller than 0. If you read it from left to right, it says 0 is bigger than x. But we need to read it from variable to number. X is smaller than 0. It would be an open circle, and where are the numbers that are smaller than 0? That's to the left. Does that make sense? Okay, email me if it doesn't. All right, example number 3. So no distributive property, no variables on both sides. I'm going to get rid of that negative 5 first, so I'm going to add 5. And remember, we don't flip the inequality if we subtract 5, or even if we're subtracting a negative, right? We only flip the inequality if we multiply or divide by a negative. So if I add 5 to both sides, okay, I didn't flip the inequality, but now look what I have to do. I got to divide both sides by negative 3. So I am dividing both sides by negative 3, so I flip the inequality. I'm flipping the inequality. Once again, I'm going to read it from variable to number, variable to number. So I'm reading from right to left. This says x is smaller than or equal to negative 6. So this one's going to be a closed circle. X is smaller than negative 6. So where the numbers are smaller than negative 6, to the left. Okay? All right, let's do this one. Notice most of these I put the variable on the right side. I think probably that caused some people some issues. When the variable's on the left side, we read it from left to right. When the variable's on the right side, we read it from right to left. Okay, so let's see. We got to subtract 2 from both sides. Now notice I got negative 3 now on the other side. It did not flip the inequality. It doesn't matter that the other side is negative. It only matters if you multiply or divide by a negative number. That's when you flip. So this time we're going to divide by 3. We're not dividing by a negative number. So the inequality does not flip. Negative 3 divided by positive 3 is negative 1. So even though the answer is negative, I didn't flip the inequality. We only flip it when you actually multiply or divide by a negative number. Boy, it sounds like I said that 8 times. Okay, I'm going to read it from variable to number, variable to number. That says a is smaller than negative 1. A is smaller than negative 1. So where are the numbers that are smaller than negative 1? To the left. Okay? All right. Lastly, I'm not going to do an example of this, but I will, well, I guess I'll do one. All right. When you have variables on both sides, nothing changes. You just solve it algebraically. If you ever multiply or divide by a negative number, flip the inequality. But some weird things can happen, like, for instance, on this one. Well, looking at the right side, we got to do the distributive property. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 3 is 6. I got variables on both sides, so I get rid of the smaller one, 2x. Subtract 2x from both sides, and the variables go away. This won't always happen, but occasionally it does. Okay, when you're left with no variables, and look at this one, 4 is not smaller than 6. 4 is smaller than 6. When you have a true statement and the variables go away, the answer is all real numbers. Okay, that doesn't always happen. It happens occasionally. Also, occasionally, this can happen. Right? Look, same problem. I just changed the numbers around slightly. Do the distributive property first. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, 2x's on both sides. Subtract 2x from both sides. Occasionally, you're left with a statement where variables drop out, and you're left, well, 4 isn't smaller than 2. A false statement. When it's a false statement, it's no solutions. Okay, most of the time when you have variables on both sides, it works just like the previous 4 problems where you get a is greater than 1 or something like that. No big deal. But occasionally the variables do drop out. If you're left with a true statement, it's all real numbers. If you're left with a false statement, it's no solutions. Okay, so I gave you a bunch of problems. I'm not claiming you got to do all of them. If you do, half of them, you're like, okay, I got this. I see my mistake. Then you're ready. But I also don't want you to get overconfident and say to yourself, oh, I did 4 of them and I got them right. I'm good to go. Don't ask for a retake unless you're ready. If you do these 30 and you're like, oh, I need to do 30 more, then just email me. I'll give you 30 more and the answers so you can confirm that you're getting these right. But this is going to be on your own. I'm not going to email you and say, hey, you got an F on the test. When are you going to take the retake? This is on your own. You're driving your own boat here. So make the wise choice. Do these problems and then email me and I'll give you a retake whenever you're ready. Okay, if you have any questions, send me an email. If not, then I'll see you on a normal day or I'll see you when you're asking for the quiz.